I think that's, that was when I read You Are the Placebo, that was that ultimately compelling case to remind us that, hey, this is something that every clinical trial accounts for. It accounts for the mind affecting the body. So anybody who's a skeptic, you can't be a skeptic. And you list, hundreds in that book alone, right? But then just knowing that we account for that in every single randomized clinical trial that we do, we account for the placebo effect affecting the body in a positive way. So we know that this happens, but that nonetheless, when something spectacular happens with the placebo effect, spontaneous remission, we'll discard that as like, that was random. Yeah. Even though we know that the placebo effect is real, or the nocebo effect, the opposite of that, is also real, still science wants to kind of like, let's just discard these spontaneous remissions.
Well, I'm actually more interested in deepening that understanding, which means, do we need a sugar pill, a saline injection, or some false surgery or procedure to change our state of being? Do you need some external influence? Because the sugar pill is a symbol. It's a symbol of possibility, and the person has been conditioned that pills heal people. So they put their power into it. And the moment the physician says, this is a new drug, and the physician is enthusiastic or excited about it, that enthusiasm becomes contagious. And the person all of a sudden sees the possibility in their mind. They actually see a future, that they actually could be healthy or better. That's a clear intention. And when they feel optimistic, when they feel inspired, when they feel grateful, when they're changing their emotions or energy, they're combining a clear intention with an elevated emotion. And if thoughts are the vocabulary of the brain and feelings are the vocabulary of the body, and how you think and how you feel creates your state of being, they just moved from their past present state of being into a future present state of being. They began to change their brain and body by thought alone. So then, do you need that sugar pill, or can you just do it without it and get so good at doing it that you can change your state of being without the belief that you need to rely on something else?
Empowering, though, right?
No,
like to take control of that mechanism and also this is the time that it needs to happen, because the general skepticism of the medical industry and of the pills actually working and of the conventional treatments actually working, that's on a downward decline. I would say on the macro, people are trusting that, I can just take a pill and everything will be fixed. People are trusting that less. So as they trust that less, their actual belief that is going to happen is going to decrease. So the result of that happening is going to decrease. So we need something else to replace that, which is the methodologies that you're really teaching.
Now, there's a caveat to this because in depression studies where they give someone a placebo and they say this is the best drug for depression, 4 out of 5 people that are in the placebo study get better or do as well as people who are taking the actual antidepressant. That's 80%, right? But here's the deal. They've been taking that sugar pill for about 8 weeks. Every day, taking that pill and combining that clear intention with an elevated emotion, they're moving into a new state of being. So now what that means is you got to do the work. That means you actually have to practice sitting down, getting beyond all the people in your life, all the things you need to do, the place you need to. You got to get beyond your body wanting to get up and go because it's been programmed that way, and you got to tell your body you're not getting up until I say. Now, this is when you come out of the bleachers and you get on the playing field, because now you have to go from the known self, disentangle from those programs, and exist in the unknown and possibilities. So then the person who's combining the clear intention with an elevated emotion and not relying on some external or exogenous substance, they're doing it by thought alone, changing their state of being, I guarantee you it's going to begin to become a habit. And they're going to know when they're there and when they're not. And the word meditation means to become familiar with. So then the more you become familiar with how you feel in changing that state of being, the easier it will be for you to do it with your eyes open as well as your eyes closed. And if you go back to the old state of being, there's a good probability that your pain or your condition will come back. So there's this kind of waltz that goes on when people are learning how to heal and change. They take a few steps forward and then a few steps back. And then 3 steps forward and only 1 step back. And they got to practice self-regulating. They got to practice what they're paying attention to, what they're unconscious of. And if you stay with it for a long enough period of time, all of a sudden now the person reaches a point, we've measured what happens, where their chemistry changes so dramatically that they're literally in love with life. Now, imagine what happens when oxytocin is released in the quantities that we see. Oxytocin signals nitric oxide. Nitric oxide signals a chemical called endothelial-derived relaxing factor, and that's a big word or set of words that just means a chemical that signals the arteries in your heart to literally expand. And when they expand, you're getting more blood flow in there. And just like when your sexual organs are aroused and there's blood flow in there, now with the same intensity, you're going to feel it right in your heart, and it's going to be way bigger. And now the person's heart is wide open. Now, so here's the question. The person feels those emotions. Do you think they're going to want to judge somebody else in that moment? You think they're going to want to hold a grudge? They're not going to try to forgive. They're going to feel so amazing. They're not going to want to lose this feeling, and they're just going to say, I forgive you. I'm not going to give this feeling up because of you. Now that's the side effect of true transformation. The side effect is a greater level of consciousness. The side effect is a greater skill set in life. And I think that when you start getting good at this, then all the things you thought you wanted, you no longer want, because when you're creating more brain and heart coherence, you feel more whole. And the more whole you feel, the less you live in lack. So how could you want many things if you feel whole? It feels like you already have them. And that's actually when you start to see those wonderful miracles, those synchronicities, those serendipities, those coincidences happening in a person. Those are experiences coming to them. That's the field dropping breadcrumbs saying, keep going. Keep going. And there's a synchronization between that person's energy and their future. And the side effect of that are signs. And that's when it gets to be exciting, because every sign does what? It creates an enthusiasm and excitement. And you're kind of going, hey, there's another sign. I'm going to go do it again. So now you're not going, oh, I have to meditate today. Oh, geez, I got to create my life.
You're looking forward.
You're like, oh my God, I don't want the magic to stop happening. I'm going to get into it. And every synchronicity creates that elevated emotion, and you use that energy for the next creation. And people climb out of their lives, climb out of their pasts.
Yeah. You know, in the book, Becoming Supernatural, you talk about, and you do this in You Are the Placebo too, you talk about the mechanism by which, you know, our thoughts can affect our body. And I thought one of the interesting things that I never really thought about, you talk about the upregulation, downregulation of some of our gene expression, but we have this term that's been thrown around, junk DNA, where 98% of our cells are filled with this junk DNA. And then you just, again, like the spontaneous remission, science just discards that. But you say, what if this is just the raw quantum building blocks for whatever the
Yeah.
You know, what if that's what that is?
I mean, that's a great conversation for 2 bottles of wine in about 4 hours, which to me, I'd rather talk about that than talk trash about anybody else or any sports figure, because that conversation is what invites possibilities. So the body's a protein producing machine. Every single cell in your body except red blood cells makes proteins. Muscle cells make muscle proteins, actin and myosin. Skin cells make skin proteins, collagen and elastin. Your stomach cells make stomach proteins called enzymes. Your immune system makes immune proteins called antibodies or immunoglobulins. Your eye cells make eye proteins called keratin. So your body's a protein producing machine. And in order for those cells to make proteins, a gene has to be regulated. So then they used to say genes create disease. Lie. It's an absolute lie. There's a very small percentage, about 5 to 1% of the people on the planet are born with a true genetic condition like type 1 diabetes. The other 95 to 99% is created from lifestyle or behaviors. 2 identical twins sharing the same genome. One dies at 52, the other one dies at 88. Well, what happened there? It was the reaction to the environment that caused their genes to be switched on or upregulated to make a healthy protein, or downregulated to make a cheaper protein. And it turns out that when you're living in stress and living in survival, you're living in emergency mode, and that's not a time for growth and repair.